Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm so excited to be with you here today. We have Charlie Sellars, and I want to just thank our loyal listeners that are tuning in and those new listeners. I want to welcome you for carving out this time and deciding to spend it with us. It's so meaningful today. So today with me is Charlie, and Charlie is the Director of Sustainability at Microsoft and an author of What We Can Do, a Climate Optimist Guide to Sustainable Living. And so I'm hoping with this conversation, we're going to have a whole new way of looking at things, maybe bring a little optimism into the conversation and shy away from the pessimism that's been so ingrained in today's world. So please stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Charlie, for those folks tuning in today, I'm really excited to have you here to talk about maybe how we can reframe sustainability. And think about incorporating it into our lives on a day-to-day basis, into our businesses. And maybe what I thought was really interesting that we could share is not having a pessimistic view, but maybe being optimistic if we can provide support and enthusiasm to people around what they're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it even goes to the title of the book itself. It's what we can do, not what we must do, not what you should be doing, but what we can do. And I think there has been a movement in environmentalism that has focused a lot on minimization. This notion that we need to minimize our footprint, which, by the way, the notion of a carbon footprint was invented by the oil and gas industry. So kind of, who knows what their intentions were. So rather than this shame based approach of minimizing our footprint, the question can be, how do we transform that into a much more optimistic notion of maximizing our impact? And that's where the notion of the book really comes from. And since this is, the Essential Ingredients podcast, I did come up with some ingredients puns for the conversation. Is to be kind of an effective climate optimist and person who cares about sustainability, you need equal parts, two different ingredients. The first is inspiration, because if you don't believe you can make a difference, and if you don't believe that what you do matters, then you're not going to make a difference and you're not going to try, and you won't have an impact. But you also need the other ingredient of empowerment, because if you are really, really encouraged to try to go make a difference, but you're not given the tools or the knowledge or the wherewithal, then all that energy kind of dissipates and becomes wasted. So my book tries to do a lot of the latter, actually, the empowerment side of that ingredients cocktail, if you will, to make sure that the optimism isn't just a pie in the sky notion. It's a pragmatic, data-driven, data-backed framework we can use to understand the little things that all of us can do, not what we must do, not what we should do, but the things that make sense for our lives to turn that dial a little bit more towards maximizing impact in our lives.
So as you're saying this, I'm thinking that's what climate optimism is, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a new term for me. Like, I haven't heard of that before. How did you get to that term? And what is it like to try to change the narrative for people from this pessimistic view, like the world is drowning, especially in the whole world that we live in right now, to now saying, okay, let's be climate optimistic.
Yeah. It's an awesome question, Justine. And part of it is just pragmatically what I experienced in my own career. Is I have this great fortune where, in addition to having written my book, What We Can Do, I'm also employed full time as a director of sustainability at Microsoft. And when I first came into the company, I was asked to build out a team to drive sustainability in the devices part of the business. And I looked around and I realized that the reason that we weren't getting traction and really embedding sustainability in everything we did was because the framing was kind of inverted. And I think there is a righteous and a rightful understanding of the urgency and of the fear. And frankly, it's hard to always be optimistic when you see all the headlines. But when you're trying to make sustainability happen, we had to shift that narrative away from sustainability as this critical, planet mandate, and if we don't do X, we're all going to burn, to flipping it on its head and making it more of like an irresistible opportunity, saying like, hey, actually, this is a really exciting thing to work on. And like, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of plastic we dredged out of the ocean. I'm going to dump it on your table, and I'm going to say, what can you do with this? Turn it into a challenge. Turn it into something that is going to be fulfilling for people to work on, rather than draining because of you might be taking the based approach instead.
Wow, I love that. I love that it just empowers people. I love that it gives people an opportunity to be creative. I mean, amazing. Congratulations. I
Thank
mean,
you.
you're changing the framework and the way people think and giving them the sort of the inspiration and the opportunity really to be able to create change themselves and innovate in a new way and feel positive about it. Not just taking something that somebody's giving them and saying, you have to do this or else.
Right.
You're saying, okay, so here's the problem. Now, there's so many different ways we can fix this. What's your thoughts?
And I think that is, people want to be invited to the table. They want to, but they want to be able to do it in a way that brings them joy. And it's really tricky sometimes if you're a person at a company and you have 10 things on your plate. And they might also be good social impact things. Like, let's say that you're in charge of accessibility. And then you're also asked to focus on sustainability. You sometimes have to make a choice of what you prioritize. And it's not that they're
Mhm.
wrong for not prioritizing sustainability, but a good way for them to not prioritize sustainability is if they have a bad vibe when they're doing it versus kind of
Right.
getting them really excited and letting people envision themselves coming along that journey with you, rather than judging them in advance for having not joined you on the journey yet.
No, it's true. And, I'm sitting here and I'm going, okay, so tell me about your journey. How did you get from where you were at Microsoft, right, to be able to now be given the keys to the kingdom to build the sustainability division so that you can empower people to create change in a meaningful way to them that will also be impactful to the world?
Yeah, it's an awesome and it's a fun journey. And Justine, you've secretly been, doing a lot of the stuff that I did to get into sustainability along the way. And it all started back in the day. I got an undergraduate degree in physics. It was a Bachelor of Arts, which is fun. That just means I did it at a liberal arts school. So I got to like do theater classes at the same time as, quantum mechanics. But
Right.
I didn't take a single class on sustainability, because at the time I was kind of being told that the way to do sustainability is to go become an environmental scientist. And even though I got a degree in physics, I'm not going to lie, Justine, I'm pretty bad at it. I'm not cut out to be a scientist. And so I just had been internalizing this notion that sustainability is not something that I can do because I don't have this skill set. So I went the
Mhm.
complete opposite direction. I went into the consulting world, and I don't know how it kept happening, Justine, but they kept giving me oil and gas clients. Like, literally, there was a day I was at a dinner with a number of clients, and one of them, this is almost verbatim, just said, "If you were to cut me open, my blood would be black because I bleed oil, and I'll always bleed oil." And honestly, Justine, that was the moment where I had that moment of self-realization. I'm like, what am I doing right now? Like, is this what I want to be building my career around? And so I worked with my company to shift me into a different role that had an opportunity for more impact, and they put me in charge of an events portfolio. And here I am in charge of an events portfolio. And all I've been given of the charter is you have a group of heads of supply chain that are your clients. You need to make sure they're happy. And I said, "That's it?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "So I can have them meet on anything I want as long as it makes them happy?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah." I mean, like, obviously, you got to get results.
Kind of sounds like a fun job, right? Just make your clients happy.
I mean, a little bit more detailed than that, your retention metrics, et cetera. But
Okay,
fundamentally,
alrighty. So you have to meet all those things. Alrighty, fair enough.
yeah, it's a business role. But the way to achieve that was left wide open to me. And that was kind of that first aha moment I had in my career of saying, well, why can't I make this job a sustainability job? And every single event that I had, I always layered on a little bit of a sustainability component. It wasn't just the how you put on the event, but also the content in it. So I would bring in interesting speakers. Like, I was able to use budget to bring in the former head of the Sierra Club to do a talk to these folks,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
really fun. And it was kind of this moment I realized that it wasn't because people didn't care about sustainability that it wasn't happening. It's just that no one had raised their hand to do it yet. No one had given themselves permission to do it yet. And I was just a lucky guy that tried it the first time and they liked it. And actually, one of my clients was my future boss at Microsoft. I just didn't know it yet. She hired me in to lead her team after the result of I should say as a result of hearing about sustainability so much at these events I was putting on.
I wanted to go back to something because I know you used a lot of data to figure out what people can do to introduce sustainability into their personal lives. And I'm just curious what some of those resources were or those sources were that you used that inspired the data for you to be able to choose and collect.
It's an awesome question. So if you read the book, there's over 200 footnotes. So I definitely spent a lot of time digging into things. I mean, some of them are like 980-page long EPA reports on like greenhouse gas inventory and sinks. Uh,
Right.
Great read. Highly recommend if you've got, in half a year with nothing to do. um, but I think one of the other things that I really tried to focus in on is that there's this amazing transition happening in the way in which we conceive of how we have impact.
Hmm.
That I got a firsthand a view of when I was kind of setting up my program at Microsoft, and it's this notion of something called life cycle assessment. And a lot of my sources really delved into that. And just to define it to those who might not be familiar, life cycle assessment says, hey, let's take anything, a cheeseburger, a keyboard, a piano. What was the entirety of all of the emissions, water, and waste used to produce this thing? Not just to use it, which is our historic kind of focus on, like, oh, am I being energy efficient with my computer? But going all the way back to, how much, where did all the raw materials come from? How much energy did it take to mine the raw materials? Then who did those raw materials go to? And how did they formulate those into small little pieces? And then who did they send those pieces to? And when you add all that up, Justine, I call it the make it, move it, use it, lose it framework in the book, because you got the make it, that piece I just mentioned, the move it of getting it to you, and then the use it we're all familiar with because we use it ourselves. But if you like apply that to what we to almost everything in our lives, the hidden cost, the hidden waste, the hidden energy, the hidden water of getting something made in the first place.
You know what? I've never actually thought about that. But now that you're bringing it to my attention, that's amazing because we don't ever think about what it takes to go into what we're getting, right? We get a new car, or some people get new cars every 3 years, like they get them in leases. And what does that mean, right? What does that mean for, what it takes to put that together, the energy, etc., and then we're passing it off. Are we okay because somebody else is going to buy the car and then we're going to get the new technology? And is that how we sort of tell ourselves that this is a good thing because we got a new, safer car? But what are we doing to the planet? Because we're creating these things so, yeah, I'm like, going a mile a minute because it feels like that the information is just incoming. Like, okay, do we slow down progress so that people don't go out and get all those new cars?
So, Justine, this is where I spend a lot of time in the book on a very familiar mnemonic. You've heard of reduce, reuse, recycle before, certainly.
Yes.
That was invented many years ago, and it was really focused on making sure that we waste less with the use of it. But it turns
Hmm.
out that that is an amazing framework to also account for how we deal with the invisible impact upstream of when we get the device or when we get the food or the car. Because then, if you think about, oh, a lot of what I need to do is to reduce the impact of what it took to make it, then reduce is an amazing place to start. Because if I am buying fewer things or buying things less frequently or using something that somebody else already has, then that's great. Then I'm not creating this new, need to create something into the world.
Right.
Reuse is also really important because if you think about when you're done with something, rather than throwing it away, like for example, my book is a great one where my publisher will hate me saying this, but I'll say it anyway. It's like when you're done reading my book, give it to somebody else. Give it for free because that way
Yeah.
two people are reading the book, but only one book had to get made to actually give the value to both readers. Recycling is still important to do, but if it gets to that point, then it's you kind of have to go all the way back into reformulating it into new materials to make something new again. So the bias kind of really here, Justine, is like use the stuff you already got. And if you do want to upgrade to like a more energy efficient thing, kind of wait until your old thing's done. I'm the one weird sustainability guy who's going to tell you to keep driving your gas car because if you throw it away too early, that's actually a whole bunch of wasted emissions instead of trying to like upgrade to a hybrid or an electric.
As you're saying that, and you're like, okay, the new iPhone comes out what every September, and I know because it's around my birthday, and you're always looking, and I usually wait every couple of years to do it, but I do it if there's a new because we do a lot of video on it. So sometimes the video quality changes. But that being said, forgetting that, right? If if you're Apple or you're Microsoft or you're who's that other Samsung, right? You're making all these new phones and you want to add all these new features because you want people to have a reason to upgrade. So as a business, it's part of their how they're growing, how they're expanding. So from the sustainability side of things, how do you think about that, integrate that into the plan while also making sure that they continue to meet their goals, their financial goals, continue to build this company?
Totally. Well, I think, what I appreciate about your podcast is that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that come on and talk, and it sounds like a lot of entrepreneurs listen as well. So I'll even generalize the answer beyond just kind of phones, which is
Yeah.
there's almost four layers to think about it. The most basic one is, do you need to do this to have license to operate? If I'm trying to sell into a market that says if you don't have this eco label, then we won't buy it, then you gotta kind of do it. But that's table stakes. Hopefully everyone realizes they gotta like follow the rules. But
Yes.
underneath that, then there's this kind of expanding layer of sustainability is a cost savings. That then you don't need a customer mandate. You don't need any sort of a broader business model conversation. You can just look at the way you're delivering your product today and saying, where am I just creating a whole bunch of waste? Uh, I'm going to go back to ingredients here. Food, great example. 30 to 40% of all food is thrown away in
Hmm.
America. That's a crazy big amount. And if you think about, if you're a farmer or you're, a General Mills or someone, you don't want to just have a whole bunch of the effort you've gone into your product to just have it be thrown away. You want to make sure that you're not overproducing and you're selling through all of your stuff. Excess inventory that gets thrown away is just bad for business, Um, and that's irrespective. Like you could straight up not believe in climate change, and you'd still want to do that because reducing waste is still good for the bottom line.
I mean, we've seen the refillable things, right? And I think more and more people are exploring that and integrating that into their business. And, I know that people don't like change. So, oftentimes you may hit resistance. What are some of the independent things people can do to make their jobs more sustainable if they come up around this resistance to have success with this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And in the book, I kind of lay out two things. The first is you don't just need sustainability in your job title to do sustainability. Hopefully, that's clearer and clearer every day as folks listen to conversations like these. But I also talk about if you end up having a job where you either own it or want to layer sustainability on top to what you're doing. There's kind of four elements of getting it going in a company. The first is you got to make it exciting. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where if you are not bringing energy to the notion that this is something we should all do together, it's hard to get people rallied around the cause. Like fear and anger are good motivators to a point, but they're
Hmm.
not great motivators for people who are not completely bought into your your cause, so to speak.
Right.
Excitement and optimism tend to be easier ways to get people in, bring people on board, get them excited. Once you've made it exciting, then you've got to make it worth it, and that goes to what we were just saying before. Of is there some form of a driver that you can point to as to why this is worth doing beyond it saves the planet? Maybe it's because we need to have that license to operate. Maybe it's because there's a revenue or market share opportunity. Maybe it reduces costs. Maybe it's an entirely new type of product you're trying to innovate and you want to make a gamble as a company. There's a lot of cool ways to make it worth it. You got to make it easy and clear is the third one, because that is something that trips up a lot of folks, is that sustainability does mean everything and nothing all at the same time. and really making it clear what sustainability means is so important. Because, like, I remember one time we put out a new piece of hardware at Microsoft, and we did all these really cool things, and we're like, here we did X, X, Y, and Z, and then someone on Twitter just said, well, I can't replace the battery, so it's not sustainable. And it's like they're right to say that we need to do that too, and you can do that now with our computers.
Right.
But
It's not all or nothing. And I think that oftentimes people feel like it's all or nothing.
mhm.
You come up against that too?
Oh God, yeah. It is all the time. I think we are sometimes our own worst enemies in our industry, where we feel like we have to do everything or else we're doing nothing. But so much of this is it's such a journey we all have to be on, because those changes have to happen incrementally over time as you get people bought into the vision and the way to get it to the very end. And the way to get it to the very end, number four, Justine, of that four-part series, is you got to make sustainability boring. And when I say boring, that might seem at odds with exciting, but boring really means, like, if you've really succeeded at making it a core part of how you do your work, it should be treated just like any other priority in your company. And that might be like just you're a 5-minute update in a 2-hour operations review, or you're a single row in an Excel spreadsheet of many other priorities. But that way, you know, you've integrated yourself into the systems that help make everything else your business does. And then sustainability is just one boring addition to a 2-hour, 2-hour meeting. And that's when you know you've really made it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love how you've created something that oftentimes people have a very pessimistic view around. Feel like they have to do everything or nothing to be successful, or not, nothing or everything in order to be successful. And just how you've changed the narrative and given people permission to explore how they can start to make a change, baby steps. And
Yeah,
so I want to come full circle to the essential ingredients, of course,
of
because I
course.
know that you've said that diets are the most important way you can change and have climate impact. Can you expand on that? What led you to the conclusion and what can we do?
So this is one of those interesting things. If you look at where we have impact, our personal life is the one where we have the most control. Then you have your professional life of how we embed it into work, and then you have your political and your community life of how you vote and how you volunteer. When it comes to just the stuff in your immediate control of your personal life, food is either the number one or number two for most people single biggest source of the water they use, the emissions they make, oftentimes the waste, because we're eating at least 3 times a day, or not, maybe not at least, but usually 3 times a day, 24 or 365 days a year, and all that food takes a lot of stuff coming in.
So if we were to expand this and talk about fish or chicken or any of those things, what would the consumption of water be like for those items?
So with fish, and this is what's so tricky about the hidden cost, because like we as the consumer, we don't get to see what went into getting the food to us. Fish doesn't really use that much water because they live in the water.
Right.
Um, the thing that's interesting with fish, though, is that the number one source of plastic in the ocean is
Uh,
discarded fishing nets. So from a waste point of view and a plastic point of view, unfortunately, if you look at some of these commercial grade trawlers, the net that they're putting into the ocean to get all that fish is oftentimes like 3 times larger than the Statue of Liberty. It's a
oh,
huge amount of plastic, and then when they're done with the nets, they often just dump them. Now, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to make sure that there's more regulation to prevent that kind of dumping, and it's usually kind of a global problem, not a local one. But it's an entirely different kind of question of what matters most to you in your own conception of making an impact. Do you want to reduce plastic waste in the ocean? Do you want to reduce water use and reduce Amazon deforestation, because beef consumption is tied to that too? Do you want to go full vegan, vegetarian? I wrote a whole blog on this
right.
too, on like Hello Fresh. It's like, is Hello Fresh more sustainable? Yes or no? It's such an interesting question.
And I think that also, I don't think there's one right answer, right? Because there's so many different things, and there's so many different situations where people eat certain ways and have to eat certain ways or need to get their protein in and whatever it is, and have different diets for different reasons. Um, so they have to make the right choice for themselves and then think about within that within that framework, what are they most comfortable with, as opposed to putting everything else above your health. Do you see what I mean? Because I oftentimes that see that people are like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. Well, okay, let's talk about what's healthy for you and ideal for you so that you can live a healthy, sustainable life. And that may look different for me than it is for you, but that's okay. The goal is to live a healthy, better for you life. So making those choices, I think, and I want to give people permission, like you said, to say what's right for you. And what's right for you doesn't have to be right for me, and that's okay.
1,000%. And I think this is where the whole point of the book is not to shame you for the decisions you're making today. It's to give you the empowerment to see where the impact actually lives in your life, to give you the choice to understand where in your life, based on the things you cherish and prioritize, whether it be your health or something else, where are the little turns of the dial that I can make, where I can start maximizing that impact more and more. And like, even like, let's say, Justine, you are a hardcore carnivore and it's like, I need my 20 burgers a month to survive, and I'm not changing that. That's okay too, as long as like you still have the option of just make sure you eat your food. Because that's the first step we can do without changing our diets at all, is just smaller portions so we don't have excess that we end up throwing away, because that's how we get to 30-40% of all food in America being thrown away, is we're not actually finishing what we buy. And
It's true.
that's a 30% improvement in your impact right there if you just actually finished your food. Go figure.
Go figure. Now, Charlie, this was such an exciting conversation and it was so tangible for me. And I hope that our listeners have the same experience, whether they're building a business or they want to live a more sustainable life. And I think changing the framework and the way that they thought about it, thinking about optimistic climate, change, I think is really paramount and a place to start. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time to tune in and share this conversation with me. So enjoyed this. For our listeners that tuned in today, or our viewers that tuned in, what would be the best way to get your book?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that, because I'm the one weird millennial who doesn't have any social media. So I'm not going to plug an Instagram account or anything, but I do have a LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. But if you want to buy the book, if you can believe it, Justine, there's even sustainability implications of how you do that. So the easiest thing you can do is find it on Amazon, What We Can Do, a Climate Optimist Guide for Sustainable Living. But if you want to have a little bit of a lower impact way to enjoy the book, consider going and asking for it at your local library, or going to your local bookstore, your independent bookstore, because it is available in America wherever books are sold. There's an electronic version as well. Turns out that you can never get a straight answer out of me, because there's always so many of these fun little qualifiers into what that is. But you can find me on Amazon if you want to just do it fast.
Thanks so much for sharing this conversation with me. I really appreciated it. It was great. I'm excited for our listeners to, you know, be empowered. So, for those tuning in today, don't forget we have a new episode every week. If you like this episode, leave us a note. We'll send it to Charlie. We'll share with him what you're doing, the impact you're having, so we can inspire others. And if you're not following us on social, even though he doesn't have social, we have social. So you can follow us at essential.ingredients on Instagram. And we also have YouTube, so you can watch our video casts. So don't forget to tune in there as well. We'll have links in the show notes so you won't be able to miss anything from his books to our podcast to our video casts. And if you like this, don't forget to like and share it with your friends. We'll see you again next week. Thanks so much.